ask you a question, and that is, what is in your life's blueprint?
This is Jeremy Till, the host of the Operator Podcast. We'll be taking you on a journey with us, interviewing some of the top performers in their field on how they operate and get the job done. At the end of the day, we want to be our best. We're going to help provide the information, the data, and the science of how to achieve that, mentally, physically, and spiritually. Let's go! Let's go! Aaron Davis, the co-founder of Train, Adapt, Evolve, is our next guest. Aaron is a practitioner of human performance, and he has his business here in Austin. And, it's pretty awesome to have a talk with Aaron just due to the fact that his high level and deep study of human performance from a data-driven arena. And so he's been able to really position himself to do deep research on individuals and their state of health and how to get people from an unhealthy state to a healthy state, or to help elite athletes regulate themselves to stay at peak state to perform. And so we got into a pretty technical conversation about certain aspects of the human body and human performance. So bear with us if it gets a little bit deep, and it's on him with the sense of the technicality. On me is just asking questions and getting great knowledge from him. So if you're into that kind of thing, you're really going to enjoy this. And if not, maybe you'll get a new insight to the way that the human body performs and works. So here's Aaron Davis. You essentially, help people, right? Is that a way you would define that?
Yeah, and to be honest, it probably didn't start out that way.
Okay.
Right? I mean, I think the whole helping people stuff really started happening when I got into the general population. So starting out as a coach, I was an athlete, so I wanted to win first.
Right? Are you competitive?
Very much so.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I was an athlete and was a runner, and at first I just wanted to replicate the coaches that I've seen that were very successful, winning national championships, whatever else. So I just wanted to be a track and field coach. That's all I wanted to be. And so I was learning everything I could in the sense of physiological, not cheats, but ways to build physiological systems better to win. And so that was my main driving force. And that took me into collegiate coaching, which I started as an assistant, was a head coach, and then I moved down here with an ex-girlfriend because I was all like, life as a head coach is easy because I was starting to win. I had a lake house, everything was great, and then I was like, do I want to do this for the next 50 years of my life? And so moved down to Austin, and that's when I started kind of understanding Gen Pop and seeing, well, man, I can't push Gen Pop people like I was pushing these younger athletes, right? And you guys probably do it too, but when you start having challenges and then you kind of start diving into their lifestyle and seeing lifestyle is like maybe not on par with them coming in 6 times a week and killing it, right? And having those conversations enough made me realize that, man, there's something greater than just winning. It's probably how can we help people, right? Be healthy. How can they manage it with all the information that is being thrown around? And so that's really started probably now. It's been my passion over the last probably 4 or 5 years is how can we understand health and how can I quarterback that for clients?
Mm-hmm. So where was it that you ran track and field?
I was at Adams State University. So it was in Colorado.
In Colorado. And then where did you coach?
Fort Hays State University right afterwards.
And where's that?
That's in Kansas.
In Kansas.
Yeah.
And how long were you there?
I was at Fort Hays for 3 years, and then went to Bethany College, another private school in Kansas, and I coached there for 3 years.
Okay. And then so when you moved to Austin, what was that transition like? You quit, you're like, I'm successful out here, and you started to contemplate like your life, your purpose. What brought you into that process?
I just wanted a challenge. It was the big thing, is that I could just see myself doing the same thing over and over. It becomes very, the school year just like, well, you having kids, you kind of, when you put them in school, you have this like, well, they're in school, your life looks like this. When they're out of school, your life looks like this. Well, it's very much the same thing when you look at collegiate coaching. It's just like you're repeating the same process over and over and over again. And then when you have it streamlined really well, then it just kind of becomes easy. And so my big thing was, do I want to do this forever? I wanted a challenge. So coming down here, I didn't know anybody, didn't know necessarily the skill set. And to be honest, I didn't know much about CrossFit. And so it was just a challenge.
What year did you move to Austin?
I think it was like 2010.
So whenever you transitioned from track and field and you moved to Austin, and I know you mentioned CrossFit, but I mean, when you got to Austin, you didn't anticipate you were going to be involved in CrossFit, did you?
Not at all.
So tell us about the move to Austin and kind of how you found yourself to where you are now.
To be honest, it's probably I was just trying to find a job, because my thing was I just wanted to be around people, wanted to lead people, wanted to help people. Well, I wanted to help win, probably more than I wanted to help people. And then I was just trying to find that niche, right? And then luckily I found Wes Kimball and Boone Putney at the time that were owning CrossFit Austin, and they hired me and gave me a salary. And at that time they were like, hey, we want you to obviously do the CrossFit stuff, but then they gave me a lot of freedom to do other things and to kind of push boundaries. And especially for me, just working with me is probably not easy, because I'm always kind of like, what's the next thing? What's the next thing? What's the next thing? Right? And trying to like, even push my boundaries of how we can help people and everything else. And so they really allowed me to grow. And then, it was weird to get into the CrossFit world and kind of see the black and white from athletics because it is very much different. I mean, you're talking about two different beasts. With sprinters, you're looking at Ferraris, right? With CrossFitters, you're looking at building tanks, right? People that are very resilient to a lot, right? Where sprinters, you can't do a lot of volume. It's more neurological, it's technical, it's coordination, they're very sensitive, where the great CrossFitters, they can just go through walls, right? And then knowing the difference and then being able to train both of them is, knowing where to kind of cut the fat.
Mm-hmm. And so at CrossFit Austin, you were working with those guys, and so were you coaching CrossFit classes?
At first, and then my last probably year or so, I wasn't coaching anything. I was just there working with people, right? One-on-one based for the most part. And did some stuff with their competitives group, maybe the last 6 or 7 months I was there, right? But for the most part, I was just there doing one-on-ones.
Private training?
Yeah, for the most part.
And then what was your protocol for private training at that point?
I mean, people would come in. Around that time, I started seeing that I needed to monitor gen pop people maybe more closely than I did with some of my athletes. And so that's where we ended up purchasing the Omega Wave, which is the ability to see some brain characteristics and then heart rate variability, right? And so we can kind of put those two and kind of give a profile of certain athletes to see how far, one, are we pushing them? And then two, are they even ready to train, right? And so seeing some people come in and seeing how stressed they were, and then trying to figure out, man, should I even train them today? And then their need or want or their motivations to get training in anyways because they feel like it's something that they like check off a box that day, right? And so how can I somehow clear that gap into doing something they need, well, they feel like they need to do, but yet making it safe for them so they can actually adapt is like the big the problem. And now that I own Train, Adapt, Evolve, and we can kind of do it our way in the sense where, like, I'll be the first one to tell you, I'm not a businessman, right? So when people come in, and if they're not ready to train, and if we don't have a good recovery method for them, we'll send them home to rest. Where most personal trainers will be like, well, I got to have that money. Well, for me, it's my ethics are I'm here to help people first. And so I don't care about money, right? For them, it's they're number one on the list, and then the financial stuff will come later. So whether I am poor underneath one of the bridges here and I need that training session, if they're not ready to train and their lifestyle isn't set to train, then we don't train them.
So how would you, with the HRV feedback from Omega Wave, how are you reading and interpreting HRV, and can you describe and explain HRV for us?
Yeah, so heart rate variability, anything in the wild that's going to survive has to have some kind of variability to their environment. And so we're looking for that in heart rate characteristics. So most people think of the heart as a metronome, right? Steady, right? But in reality, the heart is, there's variability to it. So when something is steady, you're about to die, right? When something is just static, because there's no adaptation. And so for us, we're just looking at the heart as, are we just completely static, or is there some variability to it? Is there adaptability to it, right? And so that's really what we're looking at in certain parameters. I mean, we can kind of go down to a very fundamental level in the sense of, if we look at in research, like what are certain characteristics or numbers do we need to see for people to, like they have cancer research where, you know, they take HRV on people who have cancer and they see who survives and who doesn't, and they can kind of see what numbers correlate to who has a better survival rating. And so just even from that standpoint, can we look at HRV and say, if I'm actually taking care of somebody's health, do they have the bare minimum that if something bad happened, they would be more in this survival category than they would be on the opposite side? And so we're always looking at those numbers to see, are we doing our job as trainers to, you know, prepare them for anything that might come their way?
Got it. So have you used the M-Wave from HeartMath that measures HRV? Are you familiar with their technology with HeartMath?
A little bit, in the sense of HeartMath and coherence, and having people get more coherent in the exercises that they have, but I haven't used the HeartMath.
Yeah, I'm interested to see, because, you know, HeartMath, you know, through their M-Wave technology measures heart rate variability, and I'm curious about how those are compared to what Omega Wave is testing for recovery, but also, you know, would you describe, so just to get clarity on, you know, you have your heartbeat, the pulse of your heart, when you're describing heart rate variability and you're doing your system, now are you saying that the variability is in the actual heartbeat? And then from the waves that the heart expresses or puts out, now the variability is in that or in the actual beat of the heart?
Well, you're looking at the signaling mechanisms to the heart, right? So you can think of that the heart, what we're going to be picking up is, it's kind of complex, because you can have the brain signaling to the heart, right? You can have and probably what the coherence is on the HeartMath is how somebody's breathing syncing up to the heart. Because we know if you're panting and the lungs never fully deflate, then the heart can't get a really good beat, because the lungs are sitting right on top of that heart. So when you exhale, now the heart can really expand within that beat. But say if your posture's not great, and you're very hyperextended, the rib cage is glued down, or maybe you're just really stressed, now you're just doing this with the lungs. You're just kind of panting, and then you're always kind of having this semi-inflated lung. Now the heart has to beat against that lung. And that's where like HeartMath I think is really good, is because they're trying to find this coherence of the breathing and the heart. And then what's really interesting is that it's actually the time in between the heartbeats sometimes that gives a feedback to the brain saying, hey, we might actually be healthy, right? And that's what the coherence is. They want you to start having this nice, good kind of beat-to-beat variation with the breathing, and then it can send really good signals to the brain saying, hey, we're in a good state, we're in a good parasympathetic state. And so yeah, multifactorial, I think, in the sense of the HRV and what's actually like driving that.
Yeah, from just my research with the heart rate variability is the coherence is understanding between the beats, and then the coherence, the connection of heart and brain, and the unification with that rhythmic breathing cycle that really coordinates unification of you know, the heart and the brain. So it's interesting. We'll come back and talk a little bit more about that. But so, you know, as you expanded, you know, from your business, train, adapt, and evolve, and now where you journey, because I know that you've kind of pinged around from, where you are today, and I feel like y'all are now more than ever creating a presence, in the Austin market. Kind of where are y'all at today with your services? I know you have a partner that you work with, and kind of providing services, and where do y'all want to take it? I know you talk about, and I also want to come and talk about your economic philosophy. I know I'd mentioned the one guy, what was his name, Mr. I gotta, what was his name, Mr. Bowtie Happy Money Mustache. Good job.
Yeah, last time we talked.
Did you ever get to see any of his stuff?
I haven't yet. I
got to get you the link, the Tim Ferriss interview of him. But we're going to come and talk about that too. But where you currently are with your practice and what you guys are up to.
Yeah, I think right now what we're trying to do is teach more. So we figured out that, when me and Ben House first started, I guess Dr. Ben House now, first started Train Adapt Evolve early on, we were wanting to really make a social media presence. He's really taken that on now, even with Functional Medicine Costa Rica, where he writes all the time, does little, kind of mini posts on Facebook, and really tries to educate through that realm. We also tried to do seminars, which he still does yearly, which I contribute to. But for me, I found out that I'm best with bringing in people and doing one-on-ones and teaching people in person or online mentorship. And so I think that's where we're taking it now. We're trying to bring in more coaches or having interns come on board and just teaching our process. And it's been interesting because you have to kind of find the right people. So a lot of times when we have all these gadgets, which they do cost money, and so people are like, oh man, if I go over there, then I can use this, and this, right? And I can see that sometimes their motivations might not be to necessarily client first. It might be like, oh, I want to gather this information so I can go off and, So for us, it's really been, how can we find people that are very like-minded in the sense of that their heart's in the right place, and how can we just teach? And so I think that's been something we're going to try to expand on more in the future, right? But overall, it's just, our day-to-day is just mostly either consultation or training people in person or doing evaluations in person, helping other coaches in the Austin area evaluate their own clients so that they can do a better job with, have more insight into their clients. Because the big thing is that we can't train everybody. We don't want to train everybody. It's impossible. And so how can we better serve other coaches that, let's be honest, most personal trainers, they're dogging it out. They're session after session after session, right? And it's really hard to get inventory on each client. And so we can then take inventory and then give it back to the trainer so that they have better information to make better decisions,
Mm-hmm. It's such a, it's an interesting fold of people and where they're at mentally, emotionally, spiritually, approaching what services y'all provide and really being able to comprehend it. Because and so I think, Austin in itself is a very unique field of people that, that are more open-minded and willing and seeking and learning versus, outside of this realm of where people's mind space is on, getting help and getting better, because they can really they can understand, but they might not be necessarily seeking that knowledge. So when you find people, are people coming to you as like seekers or last resort? Because I feel like that's the kind of people that might be finding you today. Yeah. Is that where you're at?
Mm-hmm. For sure. Yeah.
Could you give us, no names, but like some examples of previous people that have been on those spectrums?
Yeah. I think sometimes you see from the seeker standpoint, people just through the grapevine, somehow my name gets, or our name, or Pat or Ben, and they somehow come across Train Adapt Evolve. And they just start seeing that there's information out there, but a lot of coaches and trainers are slow to adapt it because it's kind of scary and it gets messy, right? So the body's complex and health is complex. Granted, you can simplify certain things, but a lot of trainers are almost like, I might as well just stay away from it because I don't want to understand that, or It seems very complicated. And so what we try to do is on that front is teach others, right, of how to simplify the complexity of that, right? And so we get a lot of coaches and clients that are trying to find answers, right? And it's just nice from a trainer's perspective is that when I tell a doctor that, hey, I use blood work in my evaluation, I read into that, they're all like, oh, well, are you trying to be a doctor? I'm like, no, not at all. I would hate that job, right? My thing is that I'm not about diagnosing. I'm about finding places to start, right? And then not only that too, but then trying to save my butt a little bit. At the end of the day, if I see something pop up on blood work, do I want to push that person to the edge? No. But my job is to start pushing people to the edge in the right times, in the right spaces, right? And so a lot of times it's just a screening tool for me to like, all right, well, maybe we need to divert and quarterback this to somebody else, right? And so that's a lot of times what we do when we encounter people that are seeking knowledge, right? And trying to understand what we do from that end. From the last resort, it could be athletes, right? We working with the Omega Wave and the Omega Wave community, sometimes we get people that are directors of performance in, say, pro sports, right? And they might have issues where the Omega Wave data is coming back not ideal for performance, and athletes that are on last years of their contracts, and they've kind of done most of these things, like most of the stuff that they feel they can do, and then sometimes it's just nice, I think, from their point of view, if they can reach out to an off third party, right, and be like, hey, look at this and tell me what you think, because you're unbiased, right? And so we end up doing that as well, is to kind of just look at data, interpret data, give interventions to help out, right? And a lot of times it's just simple. It sounds weird, but it is usually like one little domino that's like kind of simple to fix. It's just nudging it in the right direction. Because a lot of those athletes, they're genetically already gifted. It's just maybe putting a mindset right. It's maybe adding certain things in, and in a lot of cases, just telling them to eat more. So that's a weird thing, but most athletes undereat, right? And so it's just tweaking up things like that, and then just more of anything showing support to the staff and then the athlete, like, hey, this is actually the right way to go.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
And so a word that keeps popping up in your word usage and what I'm seeing out in the marketplace is lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
And, we've started to introduce the sauna and the ice training and breath training here, and kind of going around. And what I'm finding too with that protocol is it's depending on people's ability to support themselves in those contrasting degrees of temperatures, that it's just a signal to how, without actually putting apparatus or, data feedback, that how worn out or tired you are. And like, okay, well, I can barely get in the ice. Is it a mental, or is it you're physically tired? How much have you slept? And it starts to bring awareness. Well, this week has been tremendously challenging for me. And so I have no willpower. I'm very, weak in the sense of that, but also my body's fatigued. And then these natural elements expose that.
Yeah.
And so with lifestyle, what would be the key characteristics that you would describe as quality wellness, health and wellness lifestyles that are really indicators for you?
I think probably going back to everything our mothers told us, right? Mm-hmm. Hey, go to bed, eat your veggies, get outside and play. I mean, those are very fundamental, but especially in Austin with the fast-paced kind of business or startup or tech, you see a lot of people in dark offices, right? I mean, this probably better than me, or the Gen Pop clientele that's coming here probably from downtown. They probably don't see sunlight a whole lot, right? Vegetables is probably, if we think of just agriculturally what's happening with the soil, everything else like that. If you're thinking like maybe 8 to 12 servings of vegetables a day is probably what somebody needs on average. I myself struggle with that. Most people do. And so we can pretty much already say that from a micronutrient standpoint, they're probably a little bit depleted. And then the big driver of adaptation is sleep, right? How many people do you know that don't sleep well? I mean, if you take a poll, Gen Pop, it's probably going to be really low of people who are getting 8 hours of consistent sleep and hitting our, rim, I would say. And so a lot of the stuff that I was told and ignored from my mother, I am now preaching to clients, right? And I think it's that simple in the sense of like, do you have those in place first? If you don't, then start there.
Mm-hmm. And then if you were wanting to build off of that, what would you say is secondary?
I mean, from there, you're then looking at, obviously overall eating calorically to your lifestyle. That needs to match up. Like I said, some people, this is just not an assault on CrossFit, but most people that come in that are very hyper competitive, especially on the female side, you see them undereat, right? And so I think that's something we always need to kind of make sure we're checking, right? And even for my clients, even earlier today, like I need to be more diligent about that, even on my clients, because sometimes some come underneath the radar and I'm like, oh man, and we think of little things of maybe even a 200 calorie deficit, right, as being not a big thing. But then if the body sees things in longer time periods, in weeks and in months, now you add up a little bit over a span of weeks, months, and now you're like, man, in a 2 or 3 month span, this person's like thousands of calories in deficit. We don't think about it that way, right? We just think about it as like, oh, this day they were short. But you add it up over time, and then you're like, okay, well, and so there, I would say make sure that you're meeting your caloric needs to what your lifestyle is. And then just really good activity training if you're at that next level. And even on something where I think CrossFit's done really well is to introduce high intensity, right? I mean, as we age, we know that fast twitch fibers are starting to go out sooner than slow twitch, right? And so the ability to do actually high intensity exercise, I think can help out in that longevity. But is the timing right? It can't be every day. But are we getting doses of this? And even what you're doing with, the contrast stuff, it's the ability to see this polarizing effect in exercise or in lifestyle of, all right, we're going to chill. And then, oh man, we're going to go hard. Hey, we're going to be, 70 degrees in AC. And then now we're going to be, 35 degrees in a cold tub, or, 100 and some. And, and that's variability again. How well are you adjust to a variability? Do you have variability in your life, right? I mean, we live in a time now where everything is very easy. You can make it so you have very little variability. That's why people stress out a lot when things do change. They encounter that and they're like, whoa, wait, I've set up my life with everything being cush. I can, go from my house 70 degrees to my car that's 70 degrees, go to the drive-thru, get my coffee, go to work 70 degrees, and then go back home. I don't see sunlight, right? I kind of have everything kind of, I can favor food in. And so we probably lack that as just a species, And so I think the more we can exposure, right, to that stuff, the more it takes us back to probably our innate self to take care, to heal, to live a, say more well life.
So another spectrum I was thinking about was blue light, red light, light therapy. Where are you on that track with researching that space?
Done quite a bit earlier on. Haven't looked at it a lot lately. It's kind of one of those things where we know there's benefit, right? The sun is the best source of it. So for me, it's like, can we get them into the sun first before we do anything else, right? And so that's kind of the starting point. Blue light, obviously looking at sleep cycles, right? Or getting people to sleep, especially the Gen Pop. A lot of times they're watching Netflix on an iPad in bed, or just on TV or on their computers. And then they go from, taking in the blue light to just all of a sudden, oh, I got to go to bed. It's that time. I'm guilty of this as well. So how can we just change light cycles to better help the hormonal production to go to sleep? How can we prep sleep better, right? And so in that sense, the the simplicity of that is what's 2 hours before bed look like? What is an hour and a half before? For some people that might be too long of a time span. What does an hour at least look? The last hour, how about we take the Kindle or we take the iPad away and we go to more just a book under dim lighting, right? And a lot of times with architecture now, we have the overhead lights in our bedroom. How can we take that away? Because overhead lighting just makes it look like it probably actually casts a 12 o'clock shadow if you think about it. So your lower peripheral vision is seeing shadows that reminds it of noon from an evolutionary standpoint. So how can we have your lighting in your house come from lampshades, right? Something that's going to cast it down where it's not over top of you. Dim lighting, something that's not going to be in your eyes, feeding you. Or maybe switching up maybe circadian rhythms, So all those things are just little. And we can go into deeper stuff in the sense of like maybe light therapy, but I think the basics are always what needs to happen first. And so, just lessen the exposure, right? Make sure that you're waking up with the sun, going to bed with the sun, or generally around that time, making sure that when you do wake up, you actually see the sun, not just through your windshield of your car, right? Actually feel the sun. All those things I think are important. And I always start there first. If you don't have that, then we don't need to go into, anything else that might be wrong, right? Like take care of that first. There's always steps and progressions.
So I know we brought up a little bit ago about your kind of philosophy from a financial standpoint, and you kind of talked to me previous conversation about how you really built out your lifestyle to create a support mechanism where you maybe live within a certain, economic structure, so you don't have to take on work that doesn't, meet your ethics or, your role. So talk a little bit about that, how you would express that, because I think it's a different viewpoint than people would about make a lot of money.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's the thing is that I'm not against making money. I think it's
of course,
it allows you certain freedoms, and it's allowed me freedoms. I mean, to be honest, if you look at my client load, online client load, might be somewhere between, I think, 12 to 16 people. In person, it might be, 8 to 10, right? But my time devoted to all that, you're actually giving a lot of time to those 8 to 10 in person, right? Or you're doing a lot on the backside of getting data for the people online. But it frees you up in a sense that you can now make you better. So I have time now to perfect a craft or to push boundaries or to figure out certain things, right? So from an economic standpoint, it's one, can we filter out people that come to us that say they want to get better, but never do the work to get better? And so our evaluation process usually allows us to see that. And it's not hard to see that. You just talk to people and see in their eyes what their actual motivation is, get to the bottom of it. And you see that sometimes that, man, they really want, they know they don't feel well, but then they never want to do any work, right? And I'll even take some of these clients on because sometimes I'm like, well, maybe I can say it different than the last person. And maybe they'll actually do it, right? But then there comes a period of time where you give everything. It's kind of like that giving tree book, right? You kind of give and give and give. And then you see that you maybe don't have anything more to give because they can't participate in the relationship. Because really to build health, we're social people. And so to have somebody next to you to help build that is normal. But when that relationship, just like any relationship, is very one-sided, you have to know when to fire clients. And I think now that's when a lot of trainers, they don't do it because of financial stuff, right? Or financial reasons. And so from my perspective is that always be kind of quick to fire, regardless of financial stuff. Because now when people come to me, they know that if they don't do this, then they're not going to be working with me or I with them, right? And so I think it's different, but it allows ground rules. It keeps us both accountable, right? I mean, sometimes clients have to keep me accountable, right? at certain times. Like, hey, what's this looking like from a data analytics side, right? They're always, and I work with a lot of people that are type A because they want to see the data, And so it's just good. It's overall, it's a good place to be.
Mm-hmm. Where I mean, you've mentioned a few times how competitive you are.
Mm-hmm.
So now, as a father and kind of new life stage, where do you see your competitiveness coming out in your life?
I'd say twofold. One, it's in the sense of like, how can I acquire knowledge to better help people and be more broad than maybe another trainer, right? So there's a competitive edge of that. But then how can I rationalize that with actually living and being a better person with that? So in other words, a lot of times with knowledge, you see people, and you see it on Facebook probably all the time, right? Where people, they garner knowledge and then they want to show you how smart they are. And they want to say, hey, I know all the answers and all this, right? And there becomes like an ego attached to it. So for me, it's how can we go hand in hand of maybe acquiring a lot of knowledge and being competitive about it and having a passion and let that drive. And I would say that it's more of change to a passion more than being a competitive about it. And then how can I also work on myself to remain humble in these situations, to take criticism, to, especially as a father, is just to just live and be better and just know that, whether you call it enlightenment or whatever you want to call it. Now we're in Austin and we have this, kind of metaphysical side of everything, but just rationalizing those two and having that be my guide and pushing me towards, that's probably where I'm most competitive. I'd hate to die and then have all this knowledge and be really egotistical, or have all this knowledge and don't really use it to help people. Where's the practical side of it, right? And then from my daughter's perspective, how can I show her that I can live in a world that is a lot of times fueled by things that maybe are biblically not even good, right? But can just be a voice that when people encounter me, that they at least can see that, right? They can see that like maybe he's doing something a little bit different. And then maybe have the question of why, and let that be it. I don't have to go preach on a mountain about it. I can just do it, and then, but sometimes like anything, the struggle is that when you feel like, even now I have interns that are like, do you realize that like that your name's getting out there or whatever else? And I'm like, to be honest, like we're probably 5 or 6 years from anybody actually really like learning what we do. Right? Like if I was going to be completely honest, like we're still far away from being where I'd want to be to like replicate it, and then also to grow it, right? And so, but that's what keeps you hungry, and that's probably where the competitiveness or the passion is probably at right now, is doing right, I guess you could say.
Mm-hmm. A question that's been kind of around in my head and just thinking about is posture. And so, this is something I think would be a typical question I'd ask a interviewee. But what I found through studying Tony Robbins and studying physiological posture and what, confidence looks like, and then thinking about what humility looks like, and really this interest has arose in me about posture. And so we think about, and I don't know if we always think about this because we're always in a certain posture, and we think about intention, intentionality, and then posture, and then how we're holding a certain kind of mindset. And so when you think about, I think about you in the sense of being like, well, what does a humble posture look like to you? What does an ambitious posture look like?
Yeah.
How would you kind of describe or think about that terminology, or even a word of a posture word kind of that you would think about? Because, I mean, if you think of someone like the President of the United States, you would kind of look at his posture like, well, I mean, he's very egocentric. You just get that. And which is a whole different conversation. We won't talk about the president, but you see the posture.
Yeah. Well,
how does that show up for you, or in that?
Yeah, I mean, I can understand. I can see some of that in the sense of like, just if we look at it even from like animal studies, we see that the alpha, male is always, a little bit more proud, a little bit more erect, a little bit more open chest, right? Um, Almost in a sense of there's fear there, but more open chest in the sense of inviting for a fight, or inviting in the sense of that competitiveness, right? Where you see some of more of the subordinates are, more closed, and it becomes interesting when we talk about even autonomics from that standpoint too, right? Like stressed, whatever. Because don't get me wrong, the people that are high on the food chain, they're not less stressed per se, because they always have to deal with the incoming challenges, the fights. And when you are that way, you're going to invite more of that, right? So there's definitely stress there. The only thing is that they seem to handle it better. They perceive it better. They know their strengths better. Where some of the subordinates, they're definitely stressed, right? But they know as long as they stay in their lane, reduce variability, they can survive. Because they're not getting in the way of the big guy. And so there's definitely posture things with that as well. And you see that with clients walking in. But a lot of times when I look at that and I evaluate that, I realize that no matter what, walking in another man's shoes, you realize that even though they might be powerful or whatever else, is that there's still underlying stressors, there's still motivations, there's still things that are going to drive them. And you might have to do just a different outlook to help them. And they have to do the same thing with the people that are maybe not so much that way, right? But to be humble doesn't also mean, though, too, is that you can't be confident. I think that you can be confident and humble in the knowing that, like, you don't know everything, right? And I don't know how that comes out in posture, right? I mean, hopefully there's a mix of both, in the sense of, understanding to be meek and humble, and also understand that, like, hey, like, in this sphere of influence, that, maybe you should probably believe me.
Mm-hmm. It's unique in the sense of another guest we've had on from Clean Cause, Wes. I don't know if you know him. They got have the water, but they have Clean. It's a company that was founded out of sobriety and whatnot. But it seems that really getting where that source of humility is, and with going through Wim Hof and went through his online course, and really practicing it, committed, and doing heart math, and really starting to learn and starting to step into the nervous system and the parasympathetic, sympathetic, getting awareness around this, which is going to be an interesting conversation into the future, which I think what you're talking about 6 years down the line, then that when I think about my career, 12 years in the CrossFit space, the nervous system was the nervous system. We're going to do deadlifts and get the nervous system ready. We do the thing, and that's about as far as it went.
For sure.
You get hyped up. And so I think the conversation of the nervous system and how it functions and works is going to be a big part of lifestyle conversation moving into the future. I'm slow to adapt and learn. I mean, it just took me to get into a point where I had to learn to overcome, because I was in such a place of being crippled in that area. Mm-hmm. And leading this in the conversation. I don't even know where I'm going with that, but man, I just got out there in left field.
Well, I guess even from your point of view, because it's interesting, because even from the CrossFit perspective, right? It's hard to look at it that way, right? Look at it in the sense of, because you can probably operate your business and do still a good job, just doing like normal CrossFit protocols and stuff, right? So it's interesting, even from, when I look at what you're doing with like the breathing and the awareness and the sauna and the cold and stuff like that, is and though it is becoming a little bit more popular, but the fact that like you're having that awareness within a CrossFit gym is unique. So it's interesting that like that's come about.
It's something that I've always, been blessed to see a current shift and change, and I found CrossFit, 2005, which was before the current shifted, and we saw that adaptation from, high intensity shift into mud runs and the obstacle courses, and you've seen that, and now we're seeing that switch, and I see it very clearly why the yin and the yang, where we're coming from a generational, because if you look at generation, I started when I was 24, now I'm 35, this is generational, the contrast that's occurring, and we're in the preset stages of the 35-year-old to 45-year-old looking for the balance because they like their high intensity and they want their recovery. So as I see this in the marketplace, this will become like with mindfulness, but the connection of how do I apply this? And I think I'm just again testing, and I'm excited because I like to be at the front end of new shifts and changes. As we evolve that. Right now it's just a guinea pig learning process of what works, what doesn't, what's being impactful, what's not, discarding and adding, on the course of it is. But when I kind of talked to you about the posturing and the positions and the thoughts and about, where the sources are and where that's coming from, really when I started to get in the heart math course, I took their 8-week coaches course and getting intention, because people talk about intention, and when I get a visual imagery of intention, I see it coming through us from the backside and coming through our hearts into our present, and there's even Dr. Wayne Dyer talks about, he's got the power of intention, and I just was very aware, and if you listen to high level thinkers, you might not be on their plane, but they always talk about intention and intentionality and how that comes through you, and what heart math really got through HRV, the measurable variability of where emotions show up. And that's what I learned from M-Wave and heart math, is that to read emotions, you can express them and see them, but internally they're encapsulated in the heart.
Yeah.
HRV measures and shows the variability of anger, frustration, or thankfulness and gratitude. And that's what I love about M-Wave and heart math technology is, it's a big buzz to do gratitude, do thankfulness, but it's a feeling. You can actually put on data point measuring tools to measure the output of that electrical current that's put into the environment, which is exciting. It's like now we can measure this. I think where measurable or wearable tech will go with these measurable, touch points will be revolutionary for awareness. And I think that's what you're doing, and that's where I'm very interested. I'm not a technician like you, but I'm more of a saying this is working. This is going to be the future for people that want to go to the next level. And so kind of circling back to intention and seeing what I got when I really reached, what I would consider rock bottom for me in my current life. There might be another one in the future, a new rock bottom. Hopefully not in the same stream. But I knew that heart position and intentionality were at the core of manifesting. There's a lot of talk, with creating your reality and how do you produce it. What I found was through heart, which is the massive generator of emotion that connects with coherence to the mind, that is the creative and logistical operators that produce, it into action or connection with people. But without intention and heart awareness, you're really operating in the dark. And so it's like I got really hyper aware of like, okay, if I'm about creating my reality, but you're creating vision boards, you're trying to manifest all this stuff. It's like, well, that's an endpoint of a result. But how do you get grounded and really produce intentionality? Well, it starts in the heart, and you got to get awareness there. And if you do the data points and the connection, you can get a very clear awareness. And so now when I think about, people and their intentions, you start to see that people whenever you start to slow the nervous system down and get into a resting state, your awareness elevates and you can start to see intention at a higher level. And that's where for me to be like, okay, there's people that are more aware than me. I'm like at the 1 percentile of 100% of awareness, whatever, and then there's fractions below that. Well, at the purest state of that is your heart position and intention. And if someone at a 2 or a 10 or a 50, I can walk in the room that has much more experience than me, can walk in and see me and read me on a split second and know why I'm there, what my intentions are, or if they're positive or negative, if it's, what in the sense of what I'm producing. It's like, if I can come from a pure intention, a pure heart, a righteous heart, a humbled heart, then my acceptance in a higher visual understanding, vibrating person, then I'll be accepted in their presence. And that's why I'm like, I don't know. And my deal is day in, day out is to reground in these technologies that I'm learning to stay at a high level, aware, intended, purposeful heart and walk that out through my craft. And that's why, I get to sit here with you and the new people that walk into the life. But that's really, so how does this manifest into a CrossFit facility? Well, that's a new question. But the number one thing that I'm starting to drive towards is, do you have a breath practice? That now for me and Teo, Coach Teo, we have an argument right now. He's all about the mind is number one, then the breath. And I'm like, no, it's the breath first. And I think we're arguing in circles because I don't know if we know exactly what we're talking about. Yeah. But what I find is the breath is really setting the course for every other interaction, every other production, no matter what. Now, you could mentally not be aware of it, or you could mentally not be strong enough to have a breath intention, but at the essence of experience, the essence of creation from a human being to external starts with breath. What do you think about that?
I like it. I think the big thing is that, and like what you just mentioned there, is that you're slowing things down for somebody. How many times do people slow down for anything? And so if you can just center them, even for 5 or 10 minutes that you might be doing the exercises, it gives them a time period where they can have a moment to focus on one singular thing. And then in that moment, if they can train it over time, it allows them then to shift thoughts to, what are my intentions, my mind states, what am I doing, right? I always kind of go back to like an evolutionary standpoint, or whenever that domino was hit, from us going from this very reactionary animal based mentality of nature, in the sense that like I'm very reactionary. My instincts have they're just going to drive me wherever I go because I don't have awareness. I just have how I feel, right? Then you have this human awareness that is now obviously very apparent, and that we're supposed to be aware. We should take these instincts now that we have these drives, and we should be aware of them, and we can make sense of them. We are very self-aware of them, and we can, just even to deal with society and to have conversations, right? Like if I'm hungry right now, and if I'm more of an animal, then I'm just going to leave this podcast. Like, I'm going to go get lunch. See ya. I'd be out. But I need to be more aware and say, okay, hey, like I feel that, but you see how that us evolving the way we now have ability to control these animal instincts. What's happening now is that society's making us still very reactionary because we're stressed all the time. We're like moving at a very fast pace. We don't have time to be aware. And so that's why when things change and life does change and things happen, we're very we almost get angry and, emotional. And so just like anything, and these technologies are awesome because with technology, you have to have greater awareness. And we can actually say that for everything. I mean, any science, right? Even if we're talking about the nuclear bomb, that technology, you better have some good awareness when you start building things that are like that. To pick moments to choose when to use it, right? And same thing with us in the sense of the human body is that, yeah, it's nice having the omega wave or whatever else, but it's just numbers. Do you have the awareness to make the right decisions when using it? And as coaches, I think some people look at me and they're thinking, oh, well, he's just a computer geek or whatever, right? Like he's just taking numbers and he's telling people what to do. The numbers are just one part of what's feeding that decision. The other decision-making process is the fact that I'm dealing with a human being. So how can I emotionally use just things we do in relationships and communication into how to better alter interventions for them, right? And it might not be wholesale interventions. It might be like, hey, we're just going to try this one thing. Maybe this whole month. I just want you to do this one thing. It might be just something very, very easy, right? But there has to be an awareness to the numbers. It just can't be, as technology grows, we just can't say, hey, we're just going to do technology and then no awareness. And so that's why I think it's very interesting of when people do either breath work or meditation or, it allows them to see things and experience and to be aware of things that are going in their head and then make the decisions when they see it, and instead of being very reactionary.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's the power of heart math. And what I really picked up from that educational format and understanding the heart as a data center, and then getting intuition and getting instinct. When you think of intuition, you think of instinct connected to the higher mind. Then we have awareness, and we're all working fluidly through that, which is going to, change humanity. And that's the course I think that we've been on for.
Yeah. My thing now, though, is that with technology growing so fast and the pace of life, I think a lot of times the self-awareness piece is always lacking.
Yeah.
And that, I think going in, like my daughter, I look at her when she's my age, and I'm always interested to see where the blend of technology and self-awareness will go. Because if you look at the mainstream, they're going to keep you confused, and it's not like I think some people think of it as like a conspiracy theory, like somebody's out to get you. No, they're just giving you what you want. And what we want is the flash, the fame, the fast food that's decorated in pretty colors, right? All this to you. And so you can get distracted in that, and you can become very just instinctual, like, oh yeah, it tastes good, I want it. Oh, this is awesome, let's do this. I get pleasure from this, right? And some people will argue with me and say, well, maybe we just need to live life and have as much pleasure as possible. Maybe. But in what context is it? And then are you doing right by yourself and by others while you're doing that? And then do you have awareness as we go down this road? Because I don't think it's going to stop anytime soon.
No. And we're going to find out as time goes on. But, man, I think that we have done a good number, man.
For sure.
This is good. This is good conversation. I think we could go on talking for quite a while. So we appreciate you coming on.
Yeah.
If people want to find you online, what's the best resources to get a hold or to see what you're up to?
Probably our website, just trainadaptevolve.com. Obviously, you can always get me on Facebook. I'm usually terrible at answering a lot of stuff on Facebook, but I promise I always get around to it. But yeah, that's probably the best way to get a hold of me.
Got it. And do you have any seminars or events coming up?
I'll be doing a seminar in New York on physiological monitoring for health and performance in November in Manhattan. That's the first thing up. And then early in the year, we'll have a seminar here in Austin as well.
Awesome. So, all right, brother. Well, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you for joining us on the Operator Podcast. Please join us on our virtual platforms, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and we will see you soon.